Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 286, Own Your Introvert Uniqueness. There were two catalysts for this episode. The first was my delight at having a client tell me how much they loved my quirkiness. Now, if my inner critic Gladys had been awake at the time, she'd probably have tried to convince me that this was a backhanded compliment and that it was in fact an insult, all dolled up in a party dress for the occasion. Fortunately, Gladys was preoccupied elsewhere, leaving me free to feel the warm glow rise through me like warm honey. I was able to accept her feedback and genuinely thank her. I have to say, I carried myself a little taller through the rest of our facilitated workday together. The second catalyst came from my frustration at seeing yet another remarkable introvert thinking they had to go full-on pretzel in order to succeed. It's time we stopped bending ourselves out of shape to conform with the current stereotype of the ideal human or employee. I mean, can you imagine anything so ridiculous? That's poppycock if ever I did. There is no ideal, only beautifully, gloriously and fascinatingly unique. So this episode is devoted to enabling you to own your particular brand of unique. And I think it follows on rather nicely from the previous episode, reminding you that this is your life. So I guess this time it's more about how we make it our own. For me, this journey to own my uniqueness started quite early on in my childhood, when I got the distinct impression that I was either good or bad according to what I did. Actually, let me refine that somewhat. It wasn't an impression, it was an instruction. I was shown a lot of conditional love as a child, and it all hung on my behaviour. If I was a good girl, I was shown love and kindness. If I did something wrong or behaved badly, well, that's a whole episode in itself, for another time perhaps. These days we are so much more aware that humans, especially children, need unconditional love. Do I think the pendulum has swung too far? Well, maybe, as unconditional love seems to have morphed into a lack of discipline and a lack of moral guidance. But that's a different issue. So, in my childhood, I received loving words and actions when I did as I was told, when I studied hard, when I passed exams, when I minded my P's and Q's, especially in the company of senior, revered family members. You could say it was a strict upbringing, but I have that in part to thank for my morals, ethics and standards of behaviour. So for that, I'm not sorry that it was strict. As you might imagine, though, that didn't set up the best pattern for me to celebrate my uniqueness. However, I was always something of a rebel. An example being marrying someone wholly unsuitable, far too young, because my parents didn't like him. Oops. Even though that didn't end well, I got a safe job during that period that settled me into a particular industry. But it's what happened then, my next little rebellion, that saw me lay the foundations for the career I've enjoyed for nearly 40 years. When told that the funding for my day release study would have to stop because it wasn't relevant to my job in the drawing office, I asked if I could switch to a true engineering role so I could keep studying and applying the learning. I became an oddity, a female engineer at a time when women were more likely to be telephonists taking switchboard calls than climbing telegraph poles. but becoming a poles and holes girl was my next adventure, and I loved seeing the surprised looks on people's faces. I was even asked on several occasions by members of the public, "Should you be doing that?" I was beginning to find my unique and revel in being different. And this is something I recognise in so many of my clients, a turning point when they recognise that their pretzeling is anything but good for them. So they venture out of the shell that they have built around them, the one that kept them locked into a contorted and unflattering version of who they really are. They emerge, slowly at first, with understandable caution, a bit like a bear coming out of hibernation. For many of them, they've been locked inside that shell for decades, and that old conditioning takes a while to slough off. With the strength of the bias and the preponderance of unrealistic expectations, I wonder if it ever really leaves us. Anyway, my clients begin to recognise that the templated development they've been subjected to, the type designed to enable extroverts to succeed, was never right for them. Sure, they need to show up with credibility, but they recognise it's about being visible on their own terms, not to suit some outdated construct. And once they've seen the light, and that the templated approaches never took into account their unique wiring, they have loosened the shackles and set themselves free, often for the first time. Here's what they and I realise. The most effective development is not formulaic, it's deeply personal. There's a reason why the strapline for my business since its inception has been making learning and development personal. Do you know how many so-called professionals peddle personal development that is actually generic? It's staggering and frankly shocking. We see the same standardised course outlines, the very familiar overused theory, and group sessions dominated by the loudest voices. The language is the same, the concepts are unsuitable for those of an introverted nature, and we are all presented with the same blueprints for growth, regardless of our nature and where we're starting from. But we are not mere material to be engineered to a specific tolerance. We are nuanced, unique humans who need space and depth and understanding, not just universal steps to follow with a glib, "just trust the process." Allow me to share what is working for those of us with an introverted disposition. Truly personalised learning journeys. Quirkiness isn't a fad or window dressing or a decoration meant to cause a ruction. My love of quirkiness enables me to meet people where they are and see the potential in them, even those who don't see it for themselves. That means the development journey my clients and I undertake together is bespoke, collaborative, and purposeful. Having felt too hurried on many courses and programs that I've attended, our journey together is always structured so you go at your own pace. I remember how it felt to be called out for being too slow, for falling behind, or needing a break because I had other commitments to attend to. And once called out in that way, far from hurrying, I tend to sit down in a rather petulant fashion and stop altogether. I used to hurry until I realised that by doing so, I was missing out on the depth of learning I craved just to please the facilitator or somebody else. I'm curious to know what your natural reaction is. Petulance or something else? Do let me know. So I invite you to reflect on where you've pretzelised yourself in order to fit someone else's notion of success. Please take time to unwind yourself so that you can really stretch again, because that's the first step in reaching more of your potential. Your quirks aren't problems to iron out. They're the raw material for growth. And when you're ready for a bespoke learning journey that meets you where you are and takes you to where you want to be, let's explore that together on a clarity call, which you can book by using the link in the notes for this episode. Because the parts of you that you're trying to tuck away neatly and keep hidden out of sight are the catalyst for your growth. And that is so exciting. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.